Jimmy the Squirrel. Story by Amir Taher. It's morning already, and I am too lazy to get up. Winter is coming soon, though, so I have to collect as many nuts as I can to store in my house. Jimmy the Squirrel said, lying on his tiny bed inside his tree house. Jimmy had built his house inside an old tree in this beautiful green forest some time ago, and it had been his shelter and sweet home ever since. Jimmy washed up quickly, had a nut for breakfast, and then hurried on his way to the forest. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Frisco," said Jimmy to his neighbors, the squirrels who lived in the tree next to his. "Good morning to you, Jimmy. Come and join us for a nut and some water. It is all fresh and very tasty," said Mr. Frisco. "I would love to, Mr. Frisco, but I have a long day ahead of me. I need to collect as many nuts as possible, for winter is almost here. Maybe I will join you later in the day," Jimmy said as Mr. and Mrs. Frisco nodded in compassion. The area where Jimmy lived was very safe and held a lot of food for Jimmy and his neighboring squirrels. The younger squirrels helped the older ones collect nuts and build tree houses. Some of the squirrels lived in big trees, and others lived in smaller ones. Some chose to live in the upper parts of trees, and others chose the lower parts. All the squirrels worked happily during the day to collect their food, and they stored as much as they could in their little houses for winter. At night, they would sit together, eating dinner, dancing, relaxing, and playing cards. They all went to bed early at night so they could wake up early in the morning to start another day of work. The next morning, while Jimmy was sleeping in his tiny little bed, he heard an extremely loud noise coming from outside. Jimmy was afraid to even open the door and look outside. He went under his blankets and put his hands over his ears, hoping the sound would go away. Unfortunately for Jimmy, the sound only got louder. The source of that sound just got closer and closer to his tree. "Knock, knock, knock! Jimmy, open the door quickly!" Mr. Frisco had been calling to Jimmy, but with all the loud noise, Jimmy could not hear Mr. Frisco knocking on the door. So Mr. Frisco asked one of the kids to climb the tree and knock on Jimmy's bedroom window. Claire, one of the kid squirrels in the neighborhood, quickly scurried up the tree. "Jimmy, open the window!" shouted Claire. Recognizing Claire's voice, Jimmy jumped out of bed and opened the window. "What's going on, Claire? What is this loud noise?" "It's a big monster destroying our tree houses. Jimmy, it's ugly and scary," cried Claire. Jimmy held Claire's hand, and knowing they needed to get out of the house as fast as they possibly could, they jumped out of the window and then from the higher to the lower branches. Meeting Mr. Frisco at the front of his house, Jimmy saw a very large machine that had a steel blade in front. It was moving right and left, front and back, up and down. It took down everything that it crossed over with that ugly, sharp blade and those steel wheels. It was a scary scene for all the squirrels. All of this happened so fast, and none of the squirrels had a chance to do anything except run for their lives and save their little ones. Everyone helped one another as much as they could. Parents helped their younger squirrels, and younger squirrels helped the elderly. Jimmy and Claire helped Mr. and Mrs. Frisco, as they were like parents to them. They gathered in groups under different trees that surrounded their neighborhood. By the end of the day, all the squirrels were saved. When sunset came, the monster bulldozer stopped moving. All the squirrels were tired after running all day. They were sad and furious and petrified because they had lost their houses and food supplies, and above all, they were uncertain of what to do next. Mr. and Mrs. Frisco were heartbroken. They were now homeless, and so were the other squirrels. Jimmy looked around him, only to see what was once a home, now just land with no trees, and a monster machine staring at him with ugly, vicious eyes. Jimmy was deeply saddened and scared for the future. Later that night, the squirrels gathered together and tried to figure out what to do next. "We are homeless and have no food for winter," one squirrel said. "We might be squashed by the monster if we stay here until morning," said Claire. "I am so tired and so afraid," said Mrs. Frisco. Mr. Frisco was holding her hand, trying to comfort her, but he was also tired and frightened. He was doing his best not to show it. Jimmy gathered some courage to speak up and said in a very low voice, "I might have a solution, dear friends." Everyone looked at Jimmy at the same time and asked, "What solution, Jimmy?" Jimmy said, "We can move to Uncle George's neighborhood. There is enough shelter for all of us there, and if we work day and night, we might be able to collect enough food to help us survive the winter." The squirrels said, "But George's neighborhood is very far from here. It will take us at least a month to get there, and it will already be winter by then." "Oh, we are all going to die!" screamed one of the squirrels. "No one is going to die," Jimmy said with a louder affirmative voice. "We just need to stick together and plan well for our trip." "How? Do you have a plan, Jimmy?" asked Mr. Frisco. "I thought we could get a ride on one of those human buses. We could make it there faster, well before winter," said Jimmy. "Oh, humans will kill us if they see us on the bus," said one of the older squirrels. "No, we will not be visible to the humans. We will hide in the bus's luggage compartment," Jimmy replied. Mr. Frisco asked with interest, "And how do you propose we do so, Jimmy?" "We need to hide under the bus until the humans finish loading their luggage, and then we'll jump into the bus's luggage compartment just before the driver closes the cover," said Jimmy. "What about the bus driver? He will see us. He won't allow us to get in there," said Mr. Frisco. "We just have to distract him," said Jimmy. "And that will be my job, so that all of you can jump into the luggage compartment safely." "That is courageous of you, Jimmy, but we can't let you do that. It's too risky. You might get killed," said Mr. Frisco. "We cannot," the other squirrels agreed. "Don't worry about me," Jimmy said. "I am too fast, and the bus driver is too old. He will not be able to catch me." "I will help Jimmy," offered Claire. "With the two of us, it will be very difficult for the driver to catch either of us." "It is too much of a risk, Claire," said Jimmy. "I will not let you go alone, Jimmy. We will do this together," answered Claire. "Okay, then. We need to be very careful, Claire," Jimmy said. "We have no other option. We need to move fast, for the sun is about to rise, and we will need to collect as many nuts as we can for our trip." The squirrels agreed to proceed with Jimmy's plan, and so they did. Working in groups, the squirrels started to collect as much food as they could dig out and carry off from the wreckage of their homes. They were worried about time, as it moved fast. They were afraid of the trip to George's neighborhood, because it wasn't something that they were used to. By sunrise, the squirrels were done collecting their food and had placed it in their luggage. They decided to move in separate groups in order not to attract any attention from humans. Each group of squirrels had only one bag to carry. All the squirrels were very exhausted by that time. However, they were determined to move on with Jimmy's plan. Looking at what used to be their neighborhood for the last time, the squirrels were sad about what had happened, but glad that they were all alive. Crossing the streets with all of those little and big monster cars was a challenge to the squirrels. Led by Jimmy's group, they waited until the street was clear and then rushed to the other side of the street, one group at a time. It was a new experience for most of the squirrels, for most of them had never left their neighborhood before. Finally, when the first group of squirrels reached the bus parking lot, they became more hopeful. The spirit of survival was in them all. Mr. Frisco whispered into Jimmy's ear, "I hope they will not panic." "I am sure they will not. These are brave squirrels," Jimmy assured him. Jimmy and Claire led the groups of squirrels, looking left and right and being careful to avoid any humans nearby. They watched as luggage was being loaded onto the bus. Their fear became stronger as they all realized that they were close to jumping onto that bus, and at that point, their lives could be seriously threatened. "They are done loading the luggage," Jimmy quietly declared to the other squirrels. "We must get moving now." "Are you sure you want to do this, Jimmy?" questioned Mr. Frisco. "Yes, and there is no time for hesitation now, Mr. Frisco. We have to finish what we started," affirmed Jimmy. Holding Claire's hand, Jimmy ran as quickly as he could to the bus, targeting the bus driver in order to attract his attention. Claire and Jimmy were just a few inches away from the bus driver. They started to jump, making sounds to attract his attention, but with no luck. The bus driver was almost done loading all the luggage and was about to close the luggage compartment. In a moment of desperation, Jimmy jumped up and bit the driver in his leg. "Ouch!" shouted the driver, searching for what had bit him. Looking below, he stared at Jimmy with rage, eye to eye, stretching his arm out to catch him. At that moment, Claire jumped and bit the driver in his other leg. The driver screamed, "Oh, you miserable little squirrels! I am going to teach you a hard lesson when I get my hands on you." Jimmy and Claire started running, and the driver followed them. Meanwhile, recognizing that the coast was clear to the luggage compartment, Mr. Frisco and the other squirrels started running fast toward the bus. "Run faster, squirrels! We don't have much time!" exclaimed Mr. Frisco. The squirrels reached the bus and placed a small ladder that they carried with them so that they could climb into the luggage compartment on the side of the bus. One after the other, they climbed the ladder into the luggage compartment. They hid themselves between different bags. Finally, all were on board except for Jimmy and Claire. Mr. Frisco eagerly looked outside the luggage compartment, but no one was there. The moments passed by with no sign of either of them. The squirrels were sad and deeply worried about Jimmy and Claire. The bus driver was on his way back now, with only 2 bags left to load. The luggage compartment was about to close. The bus was about to leave, and still there was no sign of Jimmy or Claire. All of a sudden, the ladder started to move. Looking below, Mr. Frisco saw Jimmy and Claire climbing the ladder quickly. They were waving to Mr. Frisco to move back. "Jimmy and Claire made it back," the squirrels whispered excitedly to each other. Jimmy and Claire leapt into the luggage compartment, and the squirrels quickly pulled the ladder up into the luggage compartment. "Oh, those miserable squirrels ran away," murmured the bus driver with frustration as he was coming to load the last bags and close the luggage compartment door. The squirrels could only be hopeful that he would not look inside, as he could easily see them. Luckily, the driver didn't see them, and he locked the luggage compartment door. Shortly after, the bus was on the move. The squirrels celebrated happily. For the moment, and for the first time since this nightmare began, they were relaxed. All the squirrels slept for the rest of the journey. When the bus stopped at its destination, the squirrels decided to jump off and follow Jimmy, as he was familiar with the area. They all hurried to be ready to do this quickly as soon as the luggage compartment door was opened. The bus driver, tired from the trip, opened the luggage compartment door slowly. While he was deeply yawning, Jimmy shouted, directing all the squirrels to jump. The squirrels jumped off the bus's luggage compartment one after the other. The bus passengers were astonished at this sight. Some even started to scream. The bus driver, remembering the earlier incident with Jimmy and Claire, started to run after the squirrels, trying to catch any one of them. Luckily, the squirrels were faster than the bus driver, and no one was caught. The squirrels, exhausted and petrified, yet thankful for being safe and alive, followed Jimmy to his Uncle George's neighborhood. Their journey lasted a few hours. Jimmy led the squirrels while Mr. and Mrs. Frisco walked next to him. Claire was moving through the squirrels, making sure they were all fine and offering water and nuts to those who needed it the most. Finally, they all arrived safely. "Hello, Uncle George," Jimmy shouted. "Hi, Jimmy. I can't believe that you're here. Who are all your friends?" George was sitting on his rocking chair with some friends outside his treehouse. He got up and hugged Jimmy and greeted the rest of the squirrels. He offered them nuts and water. They were all very grateful for George's hospitality and generosity. Jimmy told his uncle what had happened to them back home, along with their escape story. George was very concerned and very angry, yet very glad that all the squirrels made it out alive. He offered to help them build new homes in his neighborhood with the assistance of fellow squirrel neighbors. The squirrels were thankful and happy to have survived this journey. Jimmy and Claire were their beloved heroes, and Jimmy was elected to be the head of the squirrels.